think of ourselves as the most powerful beings in the universe, it's unsettling to discover that we're wrong. Time has come to see the world as it is.
Can we pull back the veil of static and reach into the source of all being? Behind this curtain lies this random pattern generator. You will be responsible for an escalation that will destroy everything.
In this episode, I'll read a collection of journal entries about various different things. First one's an undated entry. While invoked, I was listening to the song Machine Gun by Portishead when I spiritually felt myself being skewered by many spears. Then my body split open and a spasming, writhing beast came out of my chest and was gradually subdued by the beings using the spears. They then took the beast away into the sky. I was told that it was a very powerful parasite that required something more than the usual extraction techniques. September 22nd, 2014. I just had a little interesting experience which may have involved precognition of some sort, or perhaps a synchronistic event, or just a glimpse into some sort of something out there. I was playing a game which featured a portrait gallery of 10 or so different fictional Nazi leaders. Actually, it was in the latest remake of Wolfenstein called The New Order. I was microdosed at the time and decided to make up a distinct, terrifying personality for each of them. One of them I saw in my mind's eye, pacing back and forth, glaring at me in contempt while I was subdued in front of him, and he was regarding me with the same contempt one has for a disease-carrying rat. Quite a bit later in the game, the character I was playing as was captured and woke up to find himself tied to a chair with that same Nazi from the portrait pacing back and forth in front of him, and, well, me, while he glared at me in contempt and lectured me on how I was a worthless filth and I had to be exterminated. I had a completely different vision for each of the other villains, but none of the others have appeared in the game so far. September 24th, 2014. Last night, while microdosed and ritualized, I had a close encounter with an envoy of a certain dark deity I like to refer to as the adversary or the prosecuting attorney. I see him as being similar to characters like the Riddler from Batman mythology and Clavicus Vile from the Elder Scrolls universe. And on the show Red Dwarf, the character Rimmer reminds me of him a bit, constantly playing the foil to Dave Lister, the main character. Well, anyway, last night, he pushed in really close to me, grabbed my throat, and whispered in my ear something along the lines of, "I'll be seeing a lot more of you soon," then drifted away. My guide assures me that he was referring to encounters and conflicts with him in video games I'll play in the future, referring to Fuegomancy. October 19th, 2014. I made a post a bit ago saying that a representative of a certain dark deity grabbed me by the throat and whispered in my ear, "You'll be seeing a lot more of me soon." Well, he was right. But I defeated him, so to speak. Now he is integrated. December 16th, 2013. I made an offhand joke about decorating my apartment in Christmas business, which I've never done on my own, though my family did when I was growing up, and my spirits reacted as if I had suggested draping the place in infant entrails. They are vehemently against Christmas decorations and music. I'm embarrassed to admit, actually, that I don't despise Christmas. I was raised in a family that cherished it every year. I adored it as a kid, so, it's not like I'm someone who already hates Christmas. When I questioned them about it, the basic gist I got was that having Christmas decorations and playing Christmas music invokes certain spirits. These are spirits that are associated with mainstream modern Western Christianity, mostly of the Protestant Baptist variety. They were not involved in the inception of original Gnostic Christianity. Their apparent goal is to drag mankind down in a quagmire of spiritual retardation. They want us to submit to an organized dogmatic religion so that we'll put all our spiritual and intellectual attention and action in something else rather than in fostering our own development and perspectives on reality. Why these apparent beings want to do this to us, I do not know. After going through every type of spirit being I know of, I couldn't pin down what kind of entity these guys are when asking my spirits. They said that they are a type of being which I know nothing about. My spirits urge that, even if you thoroughly reject Christianity, you should never use Christmas decorations and that they are basically bad juju, so to speak. Avoid Christmas music. Santa, though his origins are related to Odin, is now an avatar of these nasty forces. The nativity scene is especially insidious, though. Well, have a Merry Christmas as long as you avoid almost all things Christmassy. Family, friends, and festivities are great, though. Just find your own unique way to celebrate the season with your friends for different reasons. March 11th, 2014. Something rather interesting happened the other night. It's more of a psychedelic experience than a mediumistic one, though that stuff is involved. I was in the aftermath of a very mild psychedelic experience, drinking wine and listening to Wumpscut songs while visualizing the countless videos in my head that I've created for them over the years. I have a library of hundreds of videos in my head for many songs from different bands. I found that if, while listening to the music, I did the same thing that I do to get strong visual impressions from my spirits, then extremely vivid and mind-blowing images would flash through my mind. It was like seeing the real videos instead of just murky mind stuff. They were the same premises and such, but just so much better. Images of such power that they actually frightened me. Now, just on the chance that someone listening is familiar with Wumpscut, I'll read some descriptions I wrote down. The things I saw in the laboratory in my Dr. Tot video were absolutely horrifying beyond description. I caught a glimpse of a corpse altar in Voodoo Void that made my knees weak, it was so terrifying. And the monolithic red flags rippling in the wind I saw during the video for the song Fuck It scared me too. Even though they were just flags, they were so full of power I just can't describe it. I was seeing these mind videos in a higher definition than I ever had before, yet I wasn't even consciously constructing them with thought. They were just automatically and intermittently flashing into my head. A funny thing was that certain sections of the videos would be completely missing. I would just be given a blank where my conscious mind had thoroughly created imagery before. Like what was out there had been altered from what had been in my conscious memory all along. Another strange thing is that aspects of them seem to be contributions from other people. Like, I get a strong impression that, for instance, the singing Mangled Dead guy in my video for Funeral Diner has a normal fleshy human face because someone else collaborating on the video wanted him to have more expression in his face than a skinless face could offer. When I asked my spirits about this business, they said that I've completely fleshed out these videos in the spirit world and they exist as real things other people can experience. Not only that, but I've collaborated with other artists in the spirit realms on them. Hence the aspects of the videos which I don't personally agree with or didn't come up with myself consciously. Of course, I don't remember any of this activity in the spirit world, but they say that's because I'm using my waking, fleshy brain box right now for thought, emotion, and memory. Those flashes were apparently coming from other aspects of my mind and self. I continued to tap into this whatever it was while listening to the song Die Liebe and began focusing on images of close friends. Each time the song said Ich liebe dich, which means I love you in German, I visualized a friend laughing and smiling. When I got to one close friend in particular, however, I was unexpectedly and shockingly given a strong image of him cold, frozen, and asleep, eyes closed and completely shrouded in freezing blue. At first I was scared that it was portraying him as dead, but the more I thought about it, I realized that he wasn't dead in the image, but in a kind of stasis. When I asked my spirits about it, they said that it represented him being in a spiritually shut down state, not receptive to magic, so to speak. He has frozen himself in an ice block of cynicism and negativity. It was really nice, however, to see my other close friends laughing, smiling, and loving. Even the ones who are kind of in hell, so to speak, right now. And now, the news.
What the hell in God's name is going down here?
In August 1986, 13-year-old Dawn Dearden found a message on an old tape in her home in Kilnhurst, South Yorkshire, England. The tape should have had recordings of Dawn when she was 7, but at one point, another child's voice was heard saying, "Born again, never to die, born again into your family. I'm born again, born again." No one recognized the voice. The tape had been locked away in a case for 6 years. Dawn's mother said, "Dawn and Claire came running downstairs as though they had seen a ghost. They were extremely upset. We had been listening to the tape 3 weeks before, and the message was certainly not there then. There was no way anyone could have got it on the tape without first wiping off the recording of Dawn. The tape has never left this house, and we don't have the sort of equipment needed to superimpose the voice over Dawn's." In October 1987, there was a disaster at Indianapolis, Indiana, when a pilotless jet plane crashed into the Ramada Inn Hotel and exploded. Christopher Evans, age 21, was working at the hotel's front desk on that fateful day. A relative rang his parents to say that there had been an accident at the hotel, and they were preparing to go there to see if he was safe when the phone rang again. "I said, 'Hello,'" Mrs. Evans recalled. He said, "Hello, Mom." I said, "Is that you, Chris?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Are you hurt?" He said, "No, Mom, I'm okay." The Evanses were relieved, but went to the hotel to fetch Christopher. They learned that he was missing, and later he was confirmed dead. Officials speculated that Mrs. Evans was talking to her son at the time the jet hit the hotel, and they were cut off because of the crash, but Mr. and Mrs. Evans were sure they received the phone call half an hour after the disaster. In Niagara Falls, New York, in January 1958, it was 1:30 in the morning during a snowstorm, and the witness, a woman who did not wish to be identified, was driving on the New York State Thruway. Since the visibility was very poor, she was driving very carefully, trying to locate the next freeway exit. She was on her way to visit her son, who was in the Army. Suddenly, she saw what she thought was a crashed airplane in the center parkway, but as she approached, she saw a large shape with a 50-foot-high illuminated rod that was slowly sinking into the ground. The car engine then died, the lights failed, and the car came to a stop. Stricken with panic, the woman tried to restart the engine, but to no avail. At first, she considered getting out of the car to see what was happening, but thought better of it when she saw two shapes rising around the sinking rod. They were like animals with 4 legs and a tail, but they also had 2 feelers emerging from under their heads like arms. The creatures seemed to be suspended around and moving about the slim rod. Suddenly the creatures disappeared and the large shape rose up into the air. The witness could then see that it was saucer-shaped. The craft spun up about 10 feet off the ground and then took off. At that point, the woman's car lights came on and she was able to restart the car. Overwhelmed by curiosity, the witness then pulled up to where the object had been and got out to examine the spot with a flashlight. There she found a hole in the snow about a foot across, the grass showing underneath. She reported that it felt warm to the touch. In Canada, a plane crash near Lake Superior has sparked an enigma as authorities struggle to determine the pilot's whereabouts. The crash, which took place last Thursday, is now under investigation by the Ontario Provincial Police. Previous efforts by the Transportation Safety Board of Canada turned out inconclusive. Quote, "When the pilot exited and how exited is still a mystery," TSB investigator Peter Roundtree said Monday during a press release. The TSB added that they could not find human steps on the snow or evidence of a pilot near the crash site. Quote, "Our investigation is closed. There is nothing to learn here. The only way out is through the 2 cabin doors," Roundtree explained. The small plane was a 33-year-old Cessna Skyhawk that departed from Ann Arbor Municipal Airport and was reportedly rented by a Chinese national taking classes at the University of Michigan. Police did not further elaborate on the man's name. In 1971, a man with the name of Dan Cooper hijacked a passenger plane in Oregon, obtained a ransom of $200,000 to release the passengers, and later disappeared in midair, causing one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in the United States. 45 years later, the FBI officially announced they were no longer pursuing the case. A man in the west central lowlands of Scotland said he captured the image of an unknown entity. The anonymous man says he was walking through the forest with his nephew when he took the photograph. Quote, "We were on the way back down from Windy Hill in Renfrewshire," he said. "I decided to take a photo of my nephew who had just walked in front of me." The photographer claims that he felt as if someone was near. Quote, "It was a strange feeling, but I didn't notice anyone." When they returned home and uploaded their photos onto their computer, he added, he noticed the anomaly right away. "There were 1 or 2 entities, what looked like small people peering out from the tree next to my nephew," he reported. The picture shows his nephew as he walks down a brown path between the trees, in an unidentified white shape to his left that resembles a small and fully dressed astronaut. The humanoid appears to be walking towards the left side of the woods. The man says he is sure they didn't see anything of that shape and color in the area at the time the picture was taken back in 2015. The camera model used to take the picture wasn't provided, and initial EXIF analysis are unable to reveal positive doctoring. In Lewiston, Utah, a man says a small humanoid being showed up at his home on Wednesday night, watching his wife up close as she slept on their bed. The 37-year-old salesman told Cryptozoology News on Friday that it was about midnight when the creature made its appearance in the house's bedroom. Quote, "I was still awake, listening to meditation sounds to help me sleep. I don't sleep well at night, I never have," he said. "My wife was lying in bed next to me. I was changing positions when I noticed the creature." The alleged being was reportedly next to the couple's bed and staring at the woman's face. "It was crouched down and leaning over her. I quickly pulled my wife into me and was swatting at the creature, yelling loudly." The Utah man describes it as a small gray-skinned humanoid. "It was bald and it was smaller than a human, like the size of a 6-year-old child. I can describe it as Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Head was large, though, and it had thin arms and legs." The man said the creature disappeared after 5 minutes. "Later, my wife told me that she sensed something close to her face watching her as she was lying there." The man, who provided a full name but asked to remain anonymous, says he would like others who have had similar experiences to get in contact with him. "I just want some answers," he said. On September 10th, 1954, at 20:30 hours, in France, a farmer, Mr. Mazoud, was walking home when he was suddenly confronted with a helmeted being of average height who made friendly gestures, then went back into the brush, entering a cigar-shaped object about 4 meters long, which took off toward Limoges. A few minutes later, witnesses in Limoges reported a disc-shaped red object leaving a bluish trail. On September 10th, 1954, at 22:30 hours, in Quarable, France, a metalworker, Marius DeWilde, 34, came out of his house as a dog was barking and saw a dark object on the railroad tracks and observed 2 dwarfs walking toward it. When he tried to stop them, he found himself paralyzed as a strong orange light was projected at him. The creatures were under 1 meter tall, bulky, and wore dark diving suits. No faces or arms were visible. Traces made by an object of estimated weight 30 tons were noted by French Air Force and police on the ballast. Yeah, that one was on a previous episode. On September 14th, 1954, at 2200 hours, in Coldwater, Kansas, John J. Swain, 12, was driving a tractor back from the fields when he saw a small man no bigger than a 5-year-old child a few meters away from him. He had a long nose and long ears and seemed to fly when he moved toward a saucer-shaped craft hovering less than 2 meters above ground. It opened up and the creature popped inside. The craft became luminous and went out of sight. Strange traces were found by the police. The creature was dressed in shiny clothes and his shoes seemed to have fins. He carried 2 cylinders on his back and had long pointed ears. Now some strange events from France. In Ardèche department, stones and apples were thrown at farm, some falling vertically, some falling slowly. September 1921 to January 1922. At Arles-sur-Tech, 80 to 150 gallons of water annually, used for healing purposes, flow from sarcophagus and abbey. In Ars, when body of Curé of Ars was exhumed 45 years after his death, it was found to be well preserved, 17th June 1904. At Bois-des-Champs, forestry worker touched hovering UFO, April 1954. At Bourges, 1,000 franc notes raining down from sky, 1957. At Brinola, thousands of small toads fell from the sky in freak storm, 23rd September 1973. At Canet-Plage, thousands of pea-sized frogs fell from the sky just before heavy rain shower, 28th August 1977. In Cherbourg, poltergeist outbreak with blows and scratchings, 26 to 28 April 1918. In Crolon, children saw 3 apparitions of Blessed Virgin Mary, 16th July 1933. At Dieu-Sèvres, child touched ball lightning with foot, it exploded and killed 11 cattle, but child unhurt, 1904. At Douai, poltergeist activity centered on a mechanical doorbell, which finally fell off the wall and broke, June 1907. At Draguignan, 2 pilots saw elongated egg glowing white as it traveled along straight course westwards at speed, also 5 ground-based witnesses, 6th October 1952. In Dugny, 3 workers in a chalkworks saw apparition of Blessed Virgin Mary and Infant Jesus, August 1951. In Entrevieux, man broke plaster statue of St. Anne and human blood flowed from the detached hand, 1954. In Épinal, sheep and cows killed by mysterious animals. Big black cat seen in the area, 1977. In Fougères-sur-Bièvre, poltergeist outbreak with loud banging on house walls, 27th December 1913 to February 1914. At Gaillac, cigar-shaped UFO seen, accompanied by about 10 pairs of discs. They hovered over the town and quantities of angel hair fell from them, 27th October 1952. This followed a similar event at Oloron on 17th October 1952. At Grand Sindh, poltergeist outbreak with knockings, movement of objects, and mysterious fires, late 1985.
What the hell in God's name is going down here?
That was a public service announcement designed to scare the shit out.
Now, this next entry relates to the whole Wagomancy video game magic thing I talked about in another episode, but I'll read it anyway, so it was more recent and brings more detail. March 13th, 2014. A bit of a non sequitur here. For a while now, I've been experimenting with something I don't have a name for, using occult techniques and psychedelics to facilitate and amplify the creation of an alternate life and story by stringing many different games together and conjuring my own continuing narrative, whatever the word for that is. I've continually experienced absolutely mind-blowing synchronicities throughout this process, but last night absolutely floored me beyond description. I picked 2 games on my shelf which I haven't played in ages, and chose one random level from each of them. I was astonished to see that not only was my story coherently continued throughout the events I played, but characters I made up years ago, while playing other games which have nothing to do with these, were even mentioned and named. The entire story arc I was hoping to experience was laid out perfectly, step by step, in these games and levels I chose at random and don't even remember since I last played them years and years ago. There were moments when I wanted to stop, simply because everything just happened to sync up so perfectly that I didn't want to ruin the string of synchronicities with more playing. That would have been foolish, though, as everything that happened next was even more unbelievably synchronistic. I have to say this experiment has been turning out unexpectedly positive. After years of honestly striking synchronicities, I am personally convinced that it's not just chance. Of course, my spirits want to smack me anytime I try to rationalize this sort of thing away as just chance. I'm really turning the point here in being convinced that we can alter the events we experience in life in a way that lies beyond the material. It's not that I've experienced a lot of evidence for the contrary, it's just that I'm someone who needs a lot of convincing, I guess. March 14th, 2014. This morning I woke from a dream to find myself in an in-between state. I felt a soft, warm, young woman's body wrap her arms around me and press her face into the small of my neck. I became lucid and realized that it was one of my spirit contacts. I could not see her, but I could really feel her. I feel them to a degree in waking life, but I was feeling her in a much more tactile and physical way. She felt even more physical and tactile than a living physical person, if that makes any sense. Something strange I noticed was that her body was rhythmically heaving, and it honestly kind of scared me a little bit. Why the hell is her body chugging like this, I thought. In a eureka moment, I realized that she was crying. I couldn't hear her, so it didn't come across immediately. This wasn't the first time I've experienced her more clearly in a sub-sleep state. At times I've even seen her, but it just happened, so I thought I'd share. I came out of the experience and into a normal waking state. Later, she verified to me that she was crying about stressful mayhem associated with her work, which is a kind of astral interior design and architecture. Her work stresses her out quite a bit. As one spirit put it about 100 years ago, heaven is hard work, which I take as meaning that death doesn't bring instant eternal bliss and relaxation.
He was abducted by aliens earlier this afternoon. That little girl got lost under the bed and she went into an alternate dimension.
This article is called Understanding the Chakras of Planet Earth. It was posted to collectiveevolution.com on July 19, 2015 by Christina Sarich. The chakras of the Earth are perfectly aligned with our own. As the Earth awakens, so do we. In the same way, we have energy bubbling up from the lowest chakra, called Muladhara in Sanskrit, or simply the root chakra in each of us, which is striving to reach the crown, so that all of humanity can become enlightened. So too, the Earth herself is participating in this process of awakening. Though these vortices of energy have changed over time, depending on planetary cycles, they are generally understood to be in the following places, and correspond to our awakening based on the energy they help to refine. First chakra, the root or Muladhara chakra, is Mount Shasta in California. Some also believe this vortex is fifth chakra of the planet. The energy of Mount Shasta is considered primal and base. This is where the universal life force accumulates before it becomes life, and is representative of the geysers which rush to the surface with energy the same way that Kundalini energy is thought to rush to the crown to enliven the pineal gland, where all-seeing spiritual vision thus ensues. Second chakra, the sexual chakra, or Swadhisthana. Lake Titicaca in Peru, the plumed serpent, found in many South American myths, it is representative of the Kundalini energy rising to the sexual chakra of the planet. Also called the rainbow serpent, this center has some of the most ley crossroads or ley lines on the planet, second only to Bali. It is where our primal energy starts to birth itself quite literally into form. Some say that it is through this chakra that the earth overcomes entropy. Third chakra, the Manipura or the solar plexus chakra. Uluru, otherwise known as Ayers Rock in Australia, along with Kata Zuta. This huge monolithic rock is in the Northern Territory of Australia. This is where Dreamtime legends arise from the Aboriginal peoples. Enangu life revolves around Jakurpa, sometimes wrongly referred to as the Dreamtime. To the Aboriginal people, this is the ancestral period of when the world was being formed. Kata Juta is considered Uluru's sister rock formation. In us, the solar plexus is where we digest emotion. On the planet, it is where we will one day realize a legend told by the Aborigines from the umbilical cord of the planet. Fourth chakra, the heart chakra, also called Anahata. Glastonbury, Somerset, and Shaftesbury, Dorset. This is the home of the Holy Grail. It is perhaps also our greatest contribution to ourselves and our fellow sentient beings on this planet. To open our hearts to heal the Earth and allow her to embody her rightful place as a peaceful, loving satellite in space. Interestingly, this is an area known for high levels of crop circle sightings which exhibit magnetic abnormalities. Fifth chakra, the throat or Visuddha chakra. Great pyramids near Mount Sinai and Mount Olives in the Middle East. This is the one chakra that does not exist on a ley line. It is the exact center of the Earth's landmass as it currently is configured. Modern-day turmoil in the Middle East is considered to be the cries of the mother or the voice of the planet calling for help. Sixth chakra, the pineal gland or third eye chakra. This chakra can shift. It is called the Aeon Activation Center. Now it is considered to be in Western Europe, but will likely move over the next several thousand years. This chakra is the one that opens portals and allows extra-dimensional energy to enter this world. Just like our pineal gland allows us to recognize other dimensions and realities, so too does the sixth chakra of the earth. Seventh chakra, the crown chakra, or Sahasrara, the thousand-petaled lotus, the highest energy center. Mount Kailas in the Himalayas in Tibet, also known as the roof of the world. The highly developed consciousness of Tibetan people, as evidenced through the Dalai Lama's teachings, is indicative of the energy that resides at the crown chakra of the planet. Just as our own crown connects our will with divine will, so does Mount Kailas connect a planet with her spiritual destiny.
Time has come to see the world as it is.
Independent.co.uk. Yuri Geller, psychic spy. The Spoonbender's secret life as a Mossad and CIA agent revealed. New documentary claims the showbiz psychic is involved in global espionage, and after 9/11 he was reactivated as a psychic spy. Jeffrey McNabb finds out more. Posted June 14th, 2013. We may know him for spoon-bending antics and for his lengthy friendship with pop star Michael Jackson, but showbiz psychic Uri Geller has seemingly had a lengthy second career as a secret agent for Mossad and the CIA, albeit one that was more Austin Powers than James Bond. Geller was at the Sheffield Doc Fest this week for the premiere of Vikram Jayanti's The Secret Life of Uri Geller, Psychic Spy, a new film that offers compelling evidence of his involvement in this shadowy world of espionage. Uri has a controversial reputation, in quotes. A lot of people think he is a fraud, a lot of people think he is a trickster and makes things up, but at the same time he has a huge following and a history of doing things that nobody can explain, Jayanti says of his Zelig-like subject. Speaking to The Independent, Geller acknowledged an alarm when he first saw Jayanti's documentary. I was worried, and I am still concerned, Geller said of the way the documentary outs him as a spy. I didn't realize that Vikram was going to do such a thorough job of tying all the loose ends, making that the little hints I dropped throughout my career were real. When he signed up for the doc, the psychic didn't realize quite how diligently Jayanti would track down his old spy masters. Nonetheless, he is happy that the doc is showing a serious side to him. Some countries think I am a freak, bizarre, and eccentric, he says. On camera in an interview, Geller still remains coy about his espionage activities. Nonetheless, the psychic acknowledges that his handlers once asked him to use telepathy to stop a pig's heart. He refused, knowing that if he had succeeded, the next target would almost certainly have been a human. I tried to execute missions that were positive, Geller claims. I said no to the dark things. Jayanti didn't rely on Geller's own cryptic testimony. Instead, he spoke to the high-level officials involved in recruiting and using him. These include scientists from the Stanford Research Institute, as well as senior CIA operatives. Among the interviewees with first-hand knowledge of Geller's psychic spying activities are former CIA officer Kit Green, Apollo 14th astronaut Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, physicists Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, and retired U.S. Army Colonel John Alexander of the Men Who Stare at Goats fame. A Brit, Nick Pope, once the British government's UFO boffin, also puts in an appearance. We also learn about Geller's stint as a psychic bodyguard for Mexican President Jose Lopez Portillo. The doc leaves a question mark in its title, but provides so much background evidence that we are left in little doubt that even its most outlandish assertions are rooted in truth. Whether or not Geller has psychic powers, U.S. security forces were certainly prepared to take a very hefty wager on him. It is inferred that Geller attempted to use his psychic powers to disable radar during the raid on Entebbe, when Israeli commandos stormed a hijacked plane. The spoonbender also used his mind powers to try to erase the contents of floppy disks being carried back to Russia by Soviet diplomats in Mexico, and to convince a Russian minister to sign a nuclear arms reduction treaty. Geller is pictured alongside the minister, flanked by a youthful and grinning U.S. Vice President Al Gore. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appears in the doc, testifying to his many years of friendship with Geller. Jayanti's thesis is that Geller was recruited as the U.S. security forces were caught up in a psychic's arms race with their Soviet rivals, who were almost certainly bluffing about the strength of their own psychic warriors. When Jimmy Carter was elected president, one of the first things he did was to have Uri Geller give him a 4-hour briefing on the Soviet psychic threat. America didn't want a psychic gap, and Uri was the go-to guy about these things, Jayanti said. Sometimes you wonder whether Uri's entire public career has actually been a front for his shadow world activities. After 9/11, Geller was apparently reactivated as a psychic spy. The key formative event in Geller's youth appears to have been his near-death experience while fighting for the Israeli army during the Six-Day War. He came face-to-face with a Jordanian soldier and shot him to save his own life. Quote, "Out of the entire war, that one incident, that split second of killing another human being, left me scarred, and I definitely have recurring nightmares about that. I learned to live with it," Geller tells me. "When I woke up in hospital in Jerusalem, I realized what I had committed. That soldier is embedded in my soul now. He is like my brother. That is the way I feel. Although these recurring nightmares are such that he comes and grabs me and says, 'What did you do to me?' I still feel his soul is in my soul." End quote. Although Geller is coy about how he helped Mossad, he had one revealing anecdote about Israeli military leader Moshe Dayan in a restaurant. He, Dayan, was an avid collector of archaeological items, very ancient ones, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years old. They're all around Israel. When he met me and saw my powers, the first question he asked me, after the serious questions of military use and all that, was, "Yuri, do you think you can find for me some archaeological artifacts with your powers?" I said, "Moshe, I've never done that. Let's try." This led to various late-night trips when Geller would take Dayan with him as he went dowsing for ancient relics. I found quite a few things for him. He loved it. He used to collect them in his garden. Spying for the CIA is one thing, football another. In Sheffield, Geller belatedly offered his apologies to the Scottish people for using his psychic powers from a helicopter above Wembley to try to make the ball move before Gary McAllister took his fateful missed penalty against England during the Euro 1996 tournament. He acknowledged that was one occasion when he had most definitely crossed ethical lines. Quote, "I then realized after I got hate letters, hundreds and hundreds from Scotland, that it was absolutely and utterly unethical," Geller confessed. "Guess what? I bought a Scottish island. I made up with Scotland. I am an owner of a Scottish island. That, to me, means I'm partly Scottish." The year's Secret Life of Uri Geller, Psychic Spy was a premiere at the Sheffield Doc Fest and will be broadcast by the BBC later in the year.
Time has come to see the world as it is.
I'm going to read from an article called Ritual Magic, Mind Control, and the UFO Phenomenon. It was posted to conspiracyarchive.com and written by Adam Gorightly. It was not long after my own encounter with strange aerial phenomenon that I began to see a link between UFOs and such seemingly disparate topics as psychedelics, psychotronics, and ritual magic. As the years pass, the extraterrestrial hypothesis makes far less sense to the observer than other theories ranging from mind control conspiracies or, on the other hand, fissures in the space-time continuum which provide a portal of entry for ghostly apparitions that can be saucer-shaped or even take on the form of Mothmen, Chupacabras, or the Blessed Virgin Mary. UFOs encompass a wide range of phenomenon and cannot be categorized simply in terms of little gray-skinned buggers from Zeta Reticuli shoving probes up human rectums. To me, the term UFO simply suggests something unexplainable hovering in outer or inner space, whether it is machine-like elves encountered under the influence of DMT or nuts and bolt craft performing inexplicable aerial maneuvers over Area 51. UFOs are limited only by our imagination, and to consider them merely craft from another galaxy is as narrow a point of view as postulating that newborn babies are delivered exclusively by storks. UFOs are also, in my estimation, a product of altered consciousness, which is not to suggest that all sightings are in part or in whole complete hallucinations. What I'm suggesting is that in order to observe UFOs, one must often enter into a more receptive state, much like a psychic or channeler tuning into voices or subtle energies. Channelers must first induce in themselves a trance state before being able to contact voices from beyond. The same goes for magical workings, wherein magicians carry out rituals in order to invoke spirits and/or demons. A corollary to the above statement is the famed Emelantra working of legendary occultist Aleister Crowley, which consisted of a series of visions he received from January through March of 1918 via his then Scarlet Woman, one Roddy Minor. Throughout his life, Crowley had a number of Scarlet Women, who acted as channels for otherworldly transmissions of angelic and/or demonic origin. The Scarlet Woman also played a large part in Crowley's notorious sex ritual, at times combining drugs and bestiality to stir up those strange energies into which good old Uncle Al was trying to tap. To quote Crowley chronicler Kenneth Grant from Aleister Crowley and the Hidden God, quote, Crowley was aware of the possibility of opening the spatial gateways and of admitting an extraterrestrial current in the human life wave. It is an occult tradition, and Lovecraft gave it persistent utterance in his writings, that some transfinite and superhuman power is marshalling its forces with intent to invade and take possession of this planet. This is reminiscent of Charles Fort's dark hints about a secret society on Earth already in contact with cosmic beings and, perhaps, preparing the way for their advent. Crowley dispels the aura of evil with which these authors, Lovecraft and Fort, invest the fact. He prefers to interpret it thelematically, as in thelema, not as an attack upon human consciousness from within, to embrace other stars and to absorb their energies into a system that is thereby enriched and rendered truly cosmic by the process. End quote. It was through the Emelantra working, which included the ingestion of hashish and mescaline in its rituals, that Crowley came into contact with an interdimensional entity named Lam, L-A-M, who, by the way, just happens to be a dead ringer for the popular conception of the gray alien depicted on the cover of Whitley Strieber's Communion. Crowley called them Enochian entities because he purportedly contacted them using Enochian call, a Kabbalistic system or language devised by 17th century Elizabethan magician Dr. John Dee. From this alleged encounter, some have inferred that the industrious Mr. Crowley intentionally opened a portal of entry through the practice of ritual magic, which allowed the likes of Lamb and other alien greys a passageway onto Earth plane. Dr. John Dee and his scryer, Edward Kelly, had their own strange encounters with, as they call them, little men who moved about in a little fiery cloud. Thus a pattern exists in the lore of ritual magic connecting UFOs to sorcery. Some now believe that what Crowley tapped into was the same unconscious reservoir of high weirdness that helped launch the current rash of alien abductions, as reported by such experts in the field as Bud Hopkins, John Mack, David Jacobs, etc. When making these connections, bear in mind that many abductees recall their encounters with these gray-skinned creatures only after they've been hypnotically regressed. Once again, we see that trance state, not unlike those altered states of consciousness produced during rituals, such as the Emelantra working, are often the triggering factor which opens up a portal for these strange entities. According to Kenneth Grant, this tradition has been continued by current-day adepts of the Great Beast, who follow in his footsteps practicing ritual magic to invoke these quote-unquote alien entities. And outside the circles of time, Grant writes, some believe that the UFO phenomena are part of the miracle, and a mounting mass of evidence seems to suggest that mysterious entities have been located within the Earth's ambience for countless centuries, and that more and more people are being born with innate ability to see, or in some way sense their presence. Prayer for deific intervention in ancient times has now become a cri de coeur to extraterrestrial or interdimensional entities, according to whether the manifestations are viewed as occurring within man's consciousness or outside himself in apparently objective but often invisible entities. New Isis Lodge has in its archives the sigils of some of these entities. The sigils come from a grimoire of unknown origin, which forms a part of the dark Kabbalos of Beskul, located by magicians in the tunnel of Kiliefi. The grimoire describes 4 gates of extraterrestrial entry into and emergence from the known universe. End quote. What Grant is speaking of is a form of ritual magic practiced by such groups as the Golden Dawn and the Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO. Sigils are line drawings and diagrams that serve as signatures of entities accessible to a trained magician familiar with Enochian calls and other methods of summoning spirits. A grimoire is a dictionary of such sigils and a manual for their use. A noted disciple of Crowley's, Jack Parsons, one-time head of the California branch of the OTO and renowned rocket scientist, carried on this tradition of interdimensional contact when, in 1946, with the aid of Freiter H, he made contact with some sort of entities not at all unlike Crowley's lamb. This all took place during a series of magic rituals deemed the Babylon workings. What makes this story all the more bizarre is that Parsons' accomplice in this endeavor, the aforementioned Freiter H, became more commonly known afterwards as the charismatic cult leader L. Ron Hubbard, founder of Scientology. Apparently, Hubbard played a role similar to that of Edward Kelly, scryer for the aforementioned Dr. John Dee, of whom Crowley was an ardent admirer. A scryer works as a receptor of otherworldly communications, often using a crystal ball or similar device in conjunction with the magician's rituals and ceremonies to summon beings from other dimensions. Together, magician and scryer work hand in hand in summoning these otherworldly beings, be they angels, demons, or spirits of the dead. Crowley's Scarlet Woman, in many instances, performed this same function. For instance, Crowley's first wife, Rose Kelly, while in a magical trance, received the first 3 chapters of the infamous Book of the Law, the manuscript that laid the foundation for Crowley's religion, Thelema. Furthermore, the portal of entry for the extraterrestrial beings that Crowley theoretically opened when he invoked the entity Lamb may have been further enlarged by Parsons and Hubbard with the commencement of the Babylon working, thus facilitating a monumental paradigm shift in human consciousness. As Kenneth Grant wrote, quote, "The Babylon working began just prior to the wave of unexplained aerial phenomena now recalled as the Great Flying Saucer Flap. Parsons opened a door and something flew in," end quote. Such researchers as John Carter suggest that the detonation of atomic bombs over Japan during the latter part of World War II may have also played a part in opening this door between dimensions, or at least attracting the curiosity of our intergalactic neighbors. As Thelemic history instructs, 1947 ended the first stage of the Babylon working, as Parsons and Hubbard parted ways amid a cloud of turmoil. Apparently, Hubbard split with Parsons' wife and a large part of his fortune. It was the same year that the modern age of UFOs flew into view, with the Kenneth Arnold sightings over Mount Rainier in Washington state, followed not long after by the legendary saucer crash in Roswell, New Mexico. 1947 was also the year that marked the passing of the great beast, Aleister Crowley. Not long after these monumental events, in 1948, Albert Hoffman gave birth to LSD, which indicates that strange things were indeed aloft in the collective unconscious of humanity between the years of 1946 and 48. Connecting all this high weirdness up even tighter is conspiracy researcher John Judge, who, in an interview on KPFK Radio, Los Angeles, on August 12, 1989, dubbed Unidentified Fascist Observatories, stated that Kenneth Arnold and Jack Parsons were flying partners, though I have as yet been unable to find additional corroboration to support his claim. As for L. Ron Hubbard, though it is not well publicized by current-day members of the Church of Scientology, much of his religion was based on a bizarre cosmology he apparently concocted, perhaps to see how much his flock was willing to swallow. A thesis which suggested that several million years ago the souls of dead space aliens, Thetans, entered into the body of Earth humans, and that is part of the reason why today we are so screwed up as a species. Another interesting UFO parallel to note is that Parsons and Hubbard's visionary experience with these alien-like entities transpired in the California desert, which during the late 40s and 50s was a hotbed for flying saucer activity. It was in this setting that such famous contactees as George Adamski and George Hunt Williamson invoked their own brand of cosmic messengers transported by saucers, cigar-shaped vehicles, and the like, often originating from nearby Venus or other seemingly uninhabited planets in our solar system. In the 1930s, prior to his space brother encounters, Adamski operated a monastery dubbed the Royal Order of Tibet, which afforded him a permit to make sacrificial wine during the Prohibition. After the Prohibition ended, Adamski's monastery suddenly closed its doors, and he afterwards opened a burger stand near the Mount Palomar Observatory. While there, Adamski claimed to have helped astronomers photograph several UFOs, a claim that afterwards was never verified by anyone at the observatory. Adamski's first encounter with the Space Brothers occurred in the Mojave Desert on November 20th, 1952, when, in the company of George Hunt Williamson and some other friends, he witnessed a cigar-shaped craft being pursued by military jets. Just before disappearing from sight, the craft ejected a silver disc, which landed a short distance from Adamski and his party. When Adamski arrived at the saucer, he was greeted by a man with long blonde hair wearing a one-piece suit. Telepathically, this man informed Adamski he was from Venus, and that he was concerned about the possibility of atomic bomb radiation from Earth reaching other planets in the solar system, and that various beings from throughout the galaxy were visiting Earth harboring these same concerns. According to Adamski, he was taken aboard one of the alien ships and flown around to several venues throughout the universe, including the dark side of the moon. During the course of his aerial foray, Adamski took an array of spurious photographs that have been widely viewed as a hoax. In Unidentified Fascist Observatories, John Judge asserts that Adamski was an asset of the CIA, who, in his lecture tours throughout the 1950s and 60s, dispersed disinfo on behalf of the company. Adamski's colleague, George Hunt Williamson, went on to author several UFO books, such as Other Tongues, Other Flesh, and promulgated the idea of a cosmic good versus evil battle taking place between the good guys from the dog star Sirius versus the evil shitkickers from Orion. Strangely enough, the planet Sirius is a recurring theme found throughout occult and UFO lore. Of note in this regard is Robert Temple's The Sirius Mystery, published in 1977, which documents the history of the Dogon tribe in Africa and their fabled meetings with the Nomo, a race of three-eyed crab-clawed beings from Sirius. It was these intergalactic emissaries, as Dogon legend record, that passed on to the tribe as far back as 3200 BC various astronomical data, among which that Sirius has a companion star invisible to the naked eye. These legends far predate the advent of telescopes and were later confirmed by astronomers. This companion star, Sirius B, wasn't even photographed until 1970. In addition to this knowledge regarding Sirius B, such as the fact that Jupiter has 4 moons, Saturn has a ring around it, and that the planets in our solar system orbit around the Sun, all these facts, of course, were later confirmed by science. In the Sirius Mystery, Temple traces contact with the Nomos all the way back to Sumeria, circa 4500 BC. At that time, he says, these three-eyed, crab-clawed creatures appeared in their mighty spaceships from the stars, bestowing upon humankind vast secrets, revealing mysteries and esoteric knowledge passed on to initiates in various secret societies in Egypt, the Near East, and Greece. These initial contacts, Temple contends, planted the seeds for the various mystery religions, whose offshoots include the likes of Giordano Bruno, Dr. John Dee, and the overall foundation which laid the stones of Freemasonry, and other secret schools of esoteric knowledge, such as the Knights Templar and the Rosicrucians. In fact, Freemasons believe that civilization on Earth was initially formed by initiates from the Sirius star system, whom they equate with the Egyptian trinity of Isis, Osiris, and Horus. In these legends, Osiris has been portrayed as a precursor to Christ, who was first crucified, then later resurrected, forming the basis of an Egyptian priesthood that worships sun gods. The adepts of these mystery religions have always referred to themselves, in one form or another, as the Illuminati, those who have been illuminated by their worship of the various sun gods, moon goddesses. In his treatise, Temple further notes that the entire Egyptian calendar revolved around the movements of Sirius, and that the calendar year began with the quote-unquote dog days when Sirius started to rise behind the sun. According to Philip Vandenberg in The Curse of the Pharaoh, quote, an archaeologist named Duncan McNaughton discovered in 1932 that the long dark tunnels in the Great Pyramid of Cheops function as telescopes, making the stars visible even in the daytime. The Great Pyramid is oriented, according to McNaughton, to give a view from the King's Chamber of the area of the southern sky in which Sirius moves throughout the year. The brightest star in the heavens, Sirius is used for navigational purposes because it usually remains fixed in the sky. Comparatively speaking, it's approximately 35 times brighter than our own sun and is regarded in occult circles as the hidden god of the cosmos. The famous emblem of the all-seeing eye, seen hovering above the unfinished pyramid, is a depiction of the Eye of Sirius and is a common motif found throughout Masonic lore. It is no secret that many of our nation's founding fathers were Freemasons, which explains the odd appearance of the Eye of Sirius on the dollar bill, a symbol seen every day by millions of people across the globe, imprinting its image forever in our psyches. The imprinting of such imagery has been called into question in recent times by a whole host of conspiracy theorists who, in their New World Order scenarios, connect such fraternal orders as the Knights of Malta, Freemasonry, and Rosicrucianism with the quote-unquote insidious symbol of Sirius, the eye in the triangle. At the top of this pyramid, the conspiracy theorists suggest, is the dreaded Illuminati, tying all three of these fraternal orders and secret societies together in a far-flung plot intended to bring mankind to its knees under a futuristic Orwellian nightmare, a totalitarian society masquerading as a libertarian democracy, which uses Masonic imagery to program the masses. As if this entire story wasn't already jumbled enough, the dawning of the 20th century ushered in a new generation of contacts paying homage to the Dog Star, expounding ever further upon the legend of the hovering eye upon the pyramid. Right around the turn of the century, a gentleman named Lucien Francois Jean Maine formed an order in Haiti called the Cult of the Black Snake that used rituals borrowed from Crowley's OTO in combination with certain voodoo practices. In 1922, these rituals reportedly summoned forth a disembodied being named Lamb, the very same entity that Aleister Crowley made contact with a few years earlier. In fact, Kenneth Grant has stated that Crowley, quote, unequivocally identifies his holy guardian angel with Sophis or Sirius, or also known as Set-Isis. Later, in the 1950s and 60s, the aforementioned saucer contactee, George Hunt Williamson, once again summoned four certain denizens purportedly from Sirius, conversing to them in the same Enochian or angelic language used by John Dee and Aleister Crowley. Williamson, in his various books and lectures, also spoke of a secret society on Earth that has been in contact with Sirius for thousands of years, and that the emblem of this secret society is the Eye of Horus, otherwise known as the All-Seeing Eye. As previously noted, Williamson was a close associate of George Adamski, perhaps the most famous of the early UFO contactees, who claimed to be connected with astronomers at Palomar Observatory in California, in whose company he allegedly witnessed several UFO sightings. In a fascinating essay entitled Sorcery, Sex, Assassination, and the Science of Symbolism, author James Shelby Downard described a Sirius-worshipping cult reaching all the way to the highest levels of the CIA. In this provocative piece, Shelby describes one of their rituals taking place at the Palomar Observatory under the telescopically focused light of Sirius, bathing its participants in luminescence of the majestic dog star. A true illuminati ritual on high. A rush of Syrian references continued on into the 1970s, perhaps inspired by Robert Temple's book. In 1974, science fiction writer Philip K. Dick had some sort of mystical experience, which at first he attributed to psychotronic transmissions, as he called them, commenced on March 20th, 1974, showering him with endless reams and streams of visual and audio data. Initially, this overpowering onslaught of messages that Dick received was extremely unpleasant and, as he termed them, die messages. Within the following week, he reported being kept awake by violet phosphor activity, 8 hours uninterrupted. A description of this event in fictionalized form appears in A Scanner Darkly. The content of this phosphine activity was in the form of modern abstract graphics followed by Soviet music serenading his head, in addition to Russian names and words appearing there as well. Dick's original theory was that Russian mind control agents were targeting him with these transmissions. At the outset, Dick felt the emanations invading his mind were of a malevolent nature, although in time he began to believe that they were something entirely different. In a letter to Ira Einhorn, dated February 10, 1978, Dick went into more depth on those psychotronic transmissions, claiming that they, quote-unquote, seemed sentient. He felt that an alien life form existing in some upper layer of the Earth's atmosphere had been attracted by the Soviet psychotronic transmissions. Apparently, this alien life form operated as a station, tapping into some sort of interplanetary communication grid that, quote, contained and transmitted vast amounts of information. What Dick initially received were the Soviet transmissions, but eventually this alien life form, whom he called Zebra, became, quote, attracted or potentiated by the Soviet microwave psychotronic transmissions, end quote. In the months that followed, this alien entity, according to Dick, vastly improved his mental and physical well-being in a number of ways. Zebra, gave him, quote, complex and accurate information about myself and also about our infant son, which, Zebra said, had a critical and undiagnosed birth defect which required emergency and immediate surgery. My wife rushed our baby to the doctor and told the doctor what I had said, more precisely what Zebra had said to me, and the doctor discovered that it was so. Surgery was scheduled for the following day. In other words, as soon as possible. Our son would have died otherwise, end quote. Dick's wife Tessa and others have since confirmed this story regarding the medical conditions of himself and his son Christopher. Phil Dick felt Zebra was totally benign, and it held great contempt for the Soviets and their psychotronic experiments. Furthermore, Zebra informed Dick that the Earth was dying, and that spray cans were, quote, destroying the layer of atmosphere in which Zebra existed. It was not until several years after his mystical experiences with Zebra that Dick finally wrote about these events in his classic novel Valis. Prior to the publication of Valis, Dick had never made any mention of Sirius in connection with the events that so drastically impacted his life. However, in his classic work, Dick renamed Zebra to Valis, Vast Active Living Intelligence System, and identified it as a product of Sirius star system, identifying its operators as three-eyed crab-clawed beings. During this period, 1973 to 74, noted author Robert Anton Wilson was having his own experiences with quote-unquote ET denizens, which at the time he thought were telepathic communications from Sirius, as recounted in his mind-blowing book, Cosmic Trigger. Although Wilson and Dick knew one another, and Wilson was aware that he had had some sort of transcendental experience in March of 1974, Dick never mentioned Sirius in any of their conversations or anything in reference to being contacted by aliens. It wasn't until many years later, when he read Valis, that Wilson became aware of this revelation. It should also be noted that in the late 60s, early 70s, Robert Anton Wilson traveled down some of the same paths as Aleister Crowley, dabbling in ritual magic and psychedelic adventurism as a means of opening certain doors of perception, perhaps the very same ones that created a portal of entry for Lamb. Also, in the early 70s, popular English mainstream novelist Doris Lessing began a series of sci-fi novels revolving around particular entities from Sirius, which was a definite departure from her previous literary offerings. In the third novel of this series, The Syrian Experiments, Lessing relates a tale with stunning similarities to Dick's Valis experience. When Robert Anton Wilson met Mrs. Lessing in 1983, she said she had never read a lick of Dick, or Wilson for that matter. It's hard to tell how much of this was cross-pollination, be it intentional or a subconscious filtration process that leaked in and out of a few cracked brains fixated on a dog star.
Science can explain everything if we look hard enough.
Shut up, science bitch.
Nothing is true. Everything is real.
Not only is he like ruining my life, but with all this God shit that he's into, he could be ruining my afterlife.
It's a sort of interdimensional vagina that somehow appears. I can interact with it.
Fabric of the entire universe could be torn apart.
I know my mind is changing. I'm already too far gone to know what